Linda Wolf. Thank you so much for joining us all the way from Bainbridge Island, beautiful Bainbridge near Seattle. It's a pleasure to see you on Zoom. I wish it was in person. You and I have an interesting story about how we came to meet. We've been doing this show with local artists every year to honor an iconic album. And in 2018, we decided to do Mad Dogs and Englishmen. It just seemed like such a fun album. We had about 20 people involved with pulling off this show. The North Shore News contacted me. They wanted to cover the story, and they had found the original photographer who was on the tour, the Mad Dogs tour. And that was you, Linda. And much to my surprise, the North Shore News said, Linda would like to come to your show. And I'm like, wow, like it just made everything just magical and that much more special that we would get you to come to our show, make the trip all the way up. So we met and in the lobby, and we introduced the show together. You got to be in the finale song as you would have in the original Mad Dogs tour. And you got to meet everybody involved, and everybody was pretty knocked out, and it just added, as I said, this whole magical quality to the evening. The stars aligned that night, and this, we were part of something bigger than us, it felt like.
It was so sweet. It was such a great, talented group of people.
Oh, and that means a lot coming from you, Linda, because you were there. So I guess I want to go back now into your history. It's 2020 celebrated the 50th anniversary of the Mad Dogs and Englishmen tour. And tell us how you became, like, that's amazing. You were a young woman. How old were you? 19 when you were the photographer for the Mad Dogs tour? How on earth did you get the gig? I guess that's my first question.
Well, I was 19 when I showed up at the soundstage where the first rehearsal was taking place, and I was 20 when the tour started. So, and that was 6 days later. So I celebrated my 20th birthday at home with my parents while rehearsal was going on the soundstage at A&M Records. And I missed out being in the group shot, the group photograph of all of us that took off on the tour. 45 people, sometimes people say 43 people, sometimes people say 50. I don't know how many of us there were when we first took off on the first day on the Constellation, which is the name of the.
So this is LA, so that everyone knows where we're placing it in history. You grew up in LA?
I was born and raised in LA.
Yeah.
Went to Hollywood High School, and I was living at the time with the all-girl rock band Fanny. I had become their documentary photographer. I mean, I would have been their keyboardist, but I just had not practiced enough. And we loved each other so much that June said, well, why don't you just be the documentary photographer, which was perfect for me because my dad had been a cinematographer and had started me doing photography very young. So being a photographer was really my dharma and my role. And so my friend Sandy Konikoff, he was my old boyfriend. He didn't drive. And he said, Linda, could you take me over to A&M Records because there's a rehearsal going on for Joe Cocker. When we got to A&M Records soundstage, the vibe in the room was, well, it was unbelievable. I mean, the music that was being played on the riser, it was so alive. It was so spontaneous. It was so happening. And
you knew then it was special, or what you walked
oh,
into.
absolutely. I walked into this room and I was like, oh my God. And then I was told, I was introduced to Denny Cordell, the producer, and I was told that this was for a tour that was going to take off in 6 days around the United States. And I said, well, I want to go. And he said, well, what can you do? And I said, well, I could be the photographer. And I looked over and saw that Jim Gordon, who had gone to my high school, a drummer, he had a camera around his neck. So I shot some of the rehearsal. Maybe it was 2 a.m. by the time 12 at night. I can't remember a single solitary thing. There was a lot of pot smoking at the time, and I was young, and I brought the proof sheets back, and Denny took one look at him and he said, okay, you can go.
You passed the audition.
Passed the audition. And so that night, everybody went back to Leon Russell's house. And of course, those were the days where we all stayed up all night and slept all day. And that I just basically moved into Leon Russell's that night, went home. I told my parents, I'm going on a rock and roll tour and I'm the photographer. And I picked up the camera equipment I had at Fanny Hill and said bye to my parents, and the girls came and saw me off 6 days later. And
what was your parents' reaction?
Well, my parents had already been inured to my leavings, comings and goings, because I left home at 16, and then I came home, and then I left again at 18. I went to this very underground, unknown, but very famous place called Paxton Lodge with my boyfriend, Sandy Konikoff, the guy who needed a ride. That was in the Sierra Nevada mountains, and that's where Jackson Browne was recording for the first time. Anyway, we took off, and I was on the tour, and it was amazing. I was one of the 2 youngest people on the tour besides the children. The other was my friend Connie DiNardo, who was the nanny for the kids.
I know you did 48 dates in 56 cities.
For sure.
That's crazy, Linda. That's a mad schedule with 50 people. It sounds amazing. It sounds like obviously you guys were like one big extended family, and the whole thing where everybody got up on stage and everybody participated. It sounds wonderful. Joe Cocker's manager gave 8 days to prepare for the tour. I think Joe was in a period where he had just finished a very busy period and he was looking forward to some time off. But then this tour came up. He had 8 days to get on the road and to get a band together. Mm-hmm. Maybe talk a little bit about Leon Russell and how important he was. He really was the ringmaster, from what I can gather from my research. And he put it all together in a big way, with even though Joe is the headlining name on the tour.
Yeah, I mean, Leon was the conductor. And if you think conductor of energy, he was the conductor of energy. And he was the conductor of the music. And he was the conductor of the whole experience, because Joe was exhausted when he got to Los Angeles. He dumped his band, except for Chris Stainton and who's his keyboardist, and he was done. I mean, he was just exhausted. So they were all arrived at Leon Russell's, who was the only person they knew in LA. And right immediately he was told that he would be kicked out of the United States if he did not do this tour that had been set up by his management. And so he looked at Leon and he said, I don't have a band. I don't know what to do. What am I going to do? And Leon said, don't worry, I'll pull together a band for you. And then he started calling around. He called Rita Coolidge, and he asked Rita to set up a choir. Rita started getting that together. He called Sandy, he called Jim Horn, he called all these different people, Carl Radel, all the people from Tulsa that he knew. And they all started showing up that first night and then bringing others to show up for the first night. And at a certain point, Joe felt really overwhelmed. Like, what, I'm getting lost in this whole band. And I remember Leon saying, well, who do you want me to get rid of? Because there was nobody. And I think Joe was so tired. He just said, okay, look, you handle everything, Leon, and that'll be fine. That wasn't always Joe's response toward the middle of the tour. He started feeling really taken advantage of. And there's a lot to say about what happened to Joe on that tour. Also, what happened to Leon after the tour, as he was being accused of upstaging Joe. And I mean, there's a lot of history. There was, the tour was extremes. It was all kinds of extremes, from incredible love and family, as you say, to major rifts that had one young woman who was Chuck Blackwell's girlfriend, standing outside the window on the windowsill in New York, about to jump off. I mean, so there were lots of different things that happened on that tour, happening to me, happening to other people. And there was the music, and there was the high and the freedom and the I mean, we were riding a magic carpet ride. And the audiences were part of that. They were the uplifting wind, because everyone was responding to the end of the 1960s, the beginning of the 1970s. This was 1970 in the spring that we left, moving into the summer, and we had the history of the 1960s behind us, and we're just unpacking everything for a sense of freedom.
Yeah, there's a lot of idealism associated with the 60s, obviously, and then the 70s kind of brought in a darker tone. And some people say Altamont was the festival that brought in this darkness, or the end of the Summer of Love a little bit, because of what happened at Altamont, obviously, with the stabbings. And but I found this great quote for Mad Dogs from All About Jazz. Performances are loose and fun, drunken and transcendent, the soul of rock and roll. So I thought that was a nice encapsulation. You lived it, Linda. So I love, I have huge envy for anyone who came of age in the 60s. I came of age, I was a teenager in the 80s, and I worshiped so many of the artists from the 60s. I'm like, man, I wish I could have been a teenager in the 60s. And Joe Cocker has endured. Obviously, Mad Dogs and Englishmen is still revered as one of this great album and one of the great tours that ever happened. And what do you think it is about the music of this era that is so enduring and has made so many generations happy?
Our generation was influenced by the blues, by the Delta blues, by the folk movement, Dylan, the Beatles, the Stones. They're older than I am, by 8 years or so, and they were coming in on the heels of really rich, deep soil in music, and honest soulful music, gospel, soul, Stevie Wonder. I mean, we can go back to what we all grew up on. The Four Tops, the Drifters, Martha and the Vandellas. I mean, God, there was just such exciting music happening that we embodied. But at the same time, we also had a political awareness through the Vietnam War. We had a gender explosion with the first wave of feminism and the second wave of feminism that came in. We had a sexual revolution. We had a psychedelic revolution. We had all these things that came in with LSD and mushrooms and consciousness raising. And it became clear that there was a real generation gap between our parents from the 50s, in my generation. Everything that was going on was creating an awareness that of change and transformation that had to take place, and of taking our bras off and stopping wearing makeup and stopping all this phony and exploring just a whole different way to be alive. And all of that mushroomed and came together in my generation, for me, around the Summer of Love. It was an explosion, you know. They call it an explosion of a whole new way of being, with value systems that were born from all these roots that I've just discussed. And I think that Joe Cocker, Mad Dogs and Englishmen is a perfect example of what happens. We weren't necessarily ready. We weren't necessarily refined in our capacities at that point. I think it's taken decades to get more refined about how to take all that we have learned, especially from the psychedelic movement and the consciousness raising movement, and you know, the racism, sexism, domestic violence, worldwide understandings, understanding of our role in the United States, how things have developed. Now I think we're better able and more apt to express all of this that was just suddenly exploding in the consciousness movement of the 60s. And I think our music reflected that. It was honest. It was down to earth. It was real. It wasn't overly produced. And for Joe Cocker, Mad Dogs and Englishmen, the fact that it was created in 6 days and then thrown out to the public meant that every single night we were practically inventing the music on a nightly basis.
I think that's a really nice segue to your book, Cocker Power, which published about a year ago. So tell us its genesis. It brings together both worlds of, you know, of the original tour and the reunion tour at the Lock-In Festival in 2015, and it's incredible. It's a beautiful book. I love the stories. I love the photographs. Obviously, they're gorgeous. I'm sure it's been challenging, obviously, in this period in history to promote it properly.
The publishers they'll have a second run with my release, I think, once the vinyl comes out, because Tedeschi Trucks they're putting out a vinyl of the tribute concert.
Oh, fantastic. Cool.
And then the documentary is finished. And once the documentary and the vinyl come out, then there'll be another run on the book.
Great. Now, I know you've got a current exhibit at the Bainbridge Museum of Art. So, and this is inspired by your incredible photographs of the Honduran caravan of asylum seekers that obviously gained a lot of media. 2,600 miles they traveled to get to the border of the United States.
Yeah.
And you went to Mexico City to document their story, take photos, show their humanity. You know, they were being demonized by Trump, and you know, they're not getting into our country. He was being very belligerent, as he has been with asylum seekers. And you went to make a difference, you know, to tell their story through your photographs.
My sister-in-law is the director and has been the director for decades of an organization that she founded called Imumi. They work with women in migration as lawyers, advising and helping process asylum in Mexico. And it's just this phenomenal nonprofit in Mexico City. Gretchen said to me, you know, she was informing me about what was going on. And I said, I want to be there. I really want to be there, because Trump was lambasting this group of people as gang members and murderers and rapists and all of this, but he was doing it in order to blame the Democrats. It was a political move to blame the Democrats before the midterm elections in 2018, because he was just trying to he was using this particular caravan. And I was so angry already with his whole immigration policy and all that he had done, the Muslim ban and the wall and the cages and all this other stuff. The cages really came later, but he was just doing horrible things. And I knew that this wasn't the case, because Gretchen told me who these people were: the poorest of the poor from the northern Central American countries, Guatemala, El Salvador, Nicaragua, Honduras. So she called me up, like, again, everything seems to happen to me in the moment, right? I have like a split second to make a decision. And she called me up on a Thursday and she said they're arriving. They are arriving in Mexico City. They're going to get welcomed in Mexico City, and they're going to stay here for a few days to recuperate before they go on to the US border. We're going to try to keep some here. The Mexican government's offered asylum if they want to stay here. We've offered them jobs. We're going to process people. If you want to come, get here by Saturday. I looked at Eric, my husband, and I just said, get me a ticket.
Wow.
And so he got me a ticket. I got my stuff together. I got on the plane on Saturday. I arrived in Mexico City. We went on Saturday, and then they started arriving little by little. And I was so fortunate because I got there before the rest of the international press got there. And so I had really complete freedom again, like I had in all these other moments of my photography, to take photographs of everybody. And they wanted their pictures taken. Everyone wanted their picture being taken.
They knew why you were taking the photos, and they welcomed that.
Absolutely. They welcomed the international media as well. They wanted their story told. These were not people in gangs. There's no reason for a gang member to join a caravan. I was so moved. And then I stayed in contact with a few people, and I've taken their stories for this exhibit too. It's a group exhibit called Breathe, in honor of Martin Luther King and of course George Floyd and everybody else who has suffered at the hands of the police. So yeah, so that's happening. It's going to be a virtual exhibit, and then when the museum is open, then it'll be up for a month.
Great. Well,
Yeah.
you always got so much going on, Linda, and I know you're very much a family person. You got wonderful children, a lovely husband, and you're going to be a grandmother in a couple of months. So congratulations.
Thank you. Grandson.
That's fantastic news. Yeah, it makes me smile. I'm sure there's some joys that are coming out of this time as well.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I know you like to play music with your family, and I know we're going to be treated to some of that great music.
Oh my gosh. Now that I have to say, I told Derek and Susan that singing with that band in the tribute concert were the highlights of my life. And honestly, I can say that working with my daughter and Nick Moon, her partner, having COVID make it so that, we are the ones that get to play together has been an up side of COVID.
I walk the road like an isotope across the Bering Sea. Yeah. When I woke, the frost was cold, and I could hardly see. But now it's time to walk on back. Ooh. Didn't say this wouldn't be sad. You don't have to whisper to me. I can see your lips are moving towards the door. Fire and tea is the recipe. Twixt the thorns and the leaves, yeah. Find the cove, it's back to carving stone. Feel the earth between my knees. But now it's time to say goodnight. The grass is swaying in the morning light. You don't have to whisper to me. I can see your lips are moving towards the door. When the elephant spoke, 'twas a brassy note, and I could hear her yelling, please, boy. So the ice all broke, and she had to go across the Bering Sea. Yeah. You picked the lock and rolled back time. Ooh. Mystic dreams on the gentle mind. You don't have to whisper to me. I can see your lips are moving